Satellites gone up to the skies. Things like that drive me out of my mind. I watched it for a little while. I like to watch things on TV.
Okay, we're going to finish off 6.3, basic loans using compound interest. So, good news and bad news with the first page here. Good news, no calculations to worry about, so not a lot of math per se, but a whole lot to write. We're going to do a lot of talking here about different aspects of consumer credit. What is consumer credit? It's when an item is purchased and payment for it is made at a later time. So, what's the most obvious example of this? Credit cards. Now, the thing with credit cards and with all consumer credit is there's a finance charge, and what that is the amount of interest paid. So let's talk about credit cards. Now, you might have heard before, and it's true, that credit cards lead to more debt in Canada, the United States. It's just outrageous how many billions of dollars citizens of those two countries owe because of credit cards. So there's a definite risk when it comes to credit cards. So basically, with a credit card, there's no interest charged if the entire balance is paid within 25 days of the billing date. So this is the most important thing I can talk to you about, and I hope I can impress upon you. If you pay for something with your credit card, and then the billing day is like the day that it goes through, that it's billed to you, that's now charged to you. If you pay that off within 25 days, you pay no interest. So credit cards are a great thing in some ways as long as you're paying it off within 25 days. So it just should be the rule for you that when you use your credit card, you only use your credit card if you know you will pay it off within 25 days. It's so important. I can't be any more direct about it. Do not use your credit card if you don't think you can pay it off at the end of the month. Now, some people might argue with me, well, in this situation, that situation, but as much as possible, that should be your number one rule. If you don't think you can pay something off at the end of the month, don't use your credit card. If you don't pay it off, then you have to pay interest. Now, first of all, look at how high this interest rate is. 18% per annum, so 18% per year. And here's the thing, that 18% is on the entire previous monthly balance if the entire balance is not paid by the due date. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. You don't need to write this down. Let's say you owe $800 on your credit card. And you're a good consumer, so it's getting towards the billing, it's getting towards the date when you owe all that money. It's the due date, and you don't have the $800. But you say to yourself, I don't want to pay a lot of interest, so I think I can afford $700. That's almost all of it. So you pay $700. Did you pay off the whole amount? No, you didn't. You have $100 left to pay. So you need to now pay 18%. What do you pay 18% of? The $100 you still owe? No, you pay 18% of the $800. It's outrageous. You could pay everything except for $1 and they would still charge you on the whole amount. And sometimes people even like me, have credit card bills. Sometimes if you're making big purchases, you have credit card bills of 4, 5, 6. Hey, my wife with her work, when they buys products and stuff, sometimes they have $60,000, $70,000 credit card bills for the month. Imagine if she paid, only half of that, or even paid 9/10 of it, and then had to pay 18% of 60,000. This is not a good thing, people. Only use the credit card if you can pay it off at the end of the month. You know what a good plan is? Don't have a credit card. I know it sounds crazy and people are going to tell you it's awful and you need to gain a good credit rating and everything, but it's something to consider. Another possibility is to get a credit card and never use it. You can actually gain your credit rating just by having it sitting there and showing that you're not mismanaging it. Another possibility, sorry as I click this, is something I remember we used to do is we had a credit card frozen in our freezer. Why did we freeze a credit card? Because that way we had to actually think about it before we used it. We couldn't just grab the credit card and run out to the store with it. We would have to think, okay, do we really need that new TV, and as the credit card was thawing out and everything, more often than not, we just say like, you know what, just let it freeze. Okay. So next, the minimum monthly payment is 3% of the statement balance, or $10, whichever is bigger. So again, let's say your credit card bill was $800. You don't have to pay 800. I'm telling you, you should, but you don't have to pay 800. All you have to pay is 3% of that, or $10, whichever is a bigger amount. Now, that's a really small amount, 3%, $10. So that might occur to you at first like, hey, that's really good, 3%, that's a really small amount. Is that good or is that bad? It's actually, in a sense, horrible because you might get lured into only paying 3% or only paying $10. Don't do that. Again, this is what I'm telling you. You do not want to be carrying over a balance in your credit card. So this should almost be a non-issue for you. You should look at that 3% or that $10 and say, I can't believe some people only pay 3% or only pay $10. I am going to pay that whole amount off every month. I get that sometimes you might not be able to do it, but it's such a slippery slope. You can fall into a hole so fast, and it's very, very hard to dig yourself out of when it comes to credit cards, and we'll take a look at that in class. Oftentimes, to entice you to use credit cards, there'll be incentives or promotions. So these are things like, even stores have credit cards, Sears card, Woodward's card, or whatever. And so they'll have a rebate. They'll say, hey, if you take out a credit card right now, we'll give you $20 off of or $50 or whatever off your purchase. So, some people do things like they say, okay, great. And they get their purchase and they get their $50 off and then they immediately go and cancel the credit card. That's okay. You can do stuff like that. And if you're really diligent about it, you can save money. But don't be walking around with 20 credit cards in your wallet and using them all the time. That's insanity. Another thing to do is they give you rewards. So think of, for example, you probably heard of credit cards where you get air miles and stuff like that. But the thing is with things like that, you often have to pay an annual fee if you're going to get the air miles every time you pay, or cash back sometimes. I think we have a credit card. We do have a credit card where you get a certain percentage cash back. So everything you buy, you actually get 1 or 2% back from that. But you have to pay a fee for that. Other credit cards, that's one of their enticements. They say, hey, we don't have any fee, so you can use the credit card for free. Okay? And last thing, the credit limit is the maximum amount you can borrow. So, I couldn't walk in and buy a $500,000 car with my credit card. I don't have that high of a credit limit. So again, this is something that's kind of counterintuitive. You might think, oh, you want your credit card limit as high as possible. But it depends what you're doing. For my wife, who buys all her products for her business, she does want to have a high credit limit so she can do that. So what she did have to do and continues to have to do is to phone into the credit card company and say, can you please raise my credit limit? I want to be able to buy more stuff. And then they'll take a look at her credit rating and see that, yeah, she usually pays it off and everything, and they might raise it. But another thing we've done at times is we phone the credit card companies and say, can you please lower our credit limit? Now, why would you want to do that? Because then you don't get yourself into trouble by buying too much stuff. If you have a $10,000 credit limit, you're more likely to go out and spend $9,500 on some item you don't need. But if your credit card limit's only $2,000, the worst you can do is $2,000. So you have to think about it, and you might need to phone up the credit card company and ask for it to go higher. But be very careful if you do that. You need to have the money to pay it off. Or what I actually recommend you do is make it lower. It's kind of a protection for yourself that you don't overdo it and get stuck in that downward spiral of credit card debt. I know I'm overdoing it here, but if there's only one thing I can teach you in this finance section, it's that credit cards are what gets everybody into trouble in our society. We all have this mentality that if I want something, I should have it right now. And hey, I can do that with my credit card. So you have to change your mentality a little bit to have it that I want that, but I can't afford that right now. I'm going to wait a few months or a year or whatever to save up for it. But don't go into credit card debt. All right, cash advance. So this is horrible. Don't do this. A cash advance is when you use a credit card to borrow money in the form of cash. So let's say you're like, oh, I need some money. I'm going out tonight, big night out. I think I need probably a couple $100, dinner, drinks, whatever. I need a couple $100, but I don't really have the money in my bank account right now. I know. I'll use my credit card and I'll get cash by using my credit card. This is called a cash advance. I do not recommend it. The reason for that is because with a cash advance, the interest is calculated from the day the money was withdrawn. Right away, you start getting charged the interest. And remember, it's 18%. So if we look back up here, usually you get a 25-day grace period, where if I buy something with my credit card, I get 25 days where they won't charge me. But with a cash advance, if I get cash out, they start charging you the 18% on the very next day. So, $200 I took out the very next day, I owe $36 already. It's crazy. Do not do this. This is when you're very desperate. People do stuff like this, these cash advance, or very ignorant. Some people don't know. And it's just like, well, I need money. I'll just use my credit card. Do not do that. Line of credit. Okay, this is something a lot of people use. We've done this. It is a pre-approved loan that offers immediate access to funds with a minimum monthly payment based on interest. So basically you go into the bank and you say, I want a line of credit. They take a look at your salary, your job, they take a look at your credit rating, and then they might say like, yeah, okay, we'll give you $10,000 or $100,000 or $500,000 to use right away. You can have it right away. Boom, you have $500,000. Now, why do they do that? Well, one thing is because they get interest from it. They're charging you interest every month. You're paying part of it back and you're paying interest. But boy, that's a lot of money, $500,000. How can the bank be so, it just seems so risky to give that much money to you? It's not risky at all for them, because what they do is you do get a lower interest rate, which is good for you, lower than the 18%, but it's guaranteed against your assets, some kind of asset you have. Usually it's property. In other words, your house is on the line. So, you might have heard of these sort of loans where you can get lots of money, $500,000, but what's at risk is your house. So if you're able to pay off the line of credit every month, pay the interest, pay the minimum amount, it's great. You have your money available to you and everything. But if you can't pay it off, then the bank can come and take your house. This is not a good thing. The risk with this is some people, when they get their $500,000 line of credit or whatever amount, they feel like that's now money that they can now use for whatever they want. Oh, wow, we have $500,000. Let's go on trips. Let's buy a car. No, you can't think of it that way. You have to think of it like, okay, I have this $500,000, but ultimately I want to get out of this line of credit. So maybe for a short period of time, like my wife started her business, we needed money for that business, so we opened up a line of credit. But we didn't start taking trips and buying cars and fancy electronic equipment and everything. We were clear that we had to pay that line of credit off. Another way people can get into trouble. But a line of credit is a very good option as long as you're being responsible about it. All right, and the last thing I have here is the worst thing of all, payday loans. You've seen these around town, different things. I can't remember what they're called, like Loan Tree or Paying Loan. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of them. I try to not even look at them because they make me so angry. And what a payday loan is, it's a relatively small amount of money lent at a high rate of interest on the agreement that will be repaid when the borrower receives their next paycheck. So basically, someone who's running out of money, and these are usually very people in desperate situations. They need to pay for food, they need to pay for rent, whatever, and they say, well, I have no access to funds here. What am I going to do? So they go in and they say, listen, I need to get $400, let's say, and the payday loan people say, sure, we'll give you $400. But the next time you get your paycheck in a few weeks or whatever, you're going to give us a percentage of that paycheck. And they charge you an interest rate that is absolutely insane. We'll figure it out in class. I don't want to ruin it. But I remember the last time I did this with the class, there was like shrieks of disbelief with how high the interest rate is. So we'll look at that in class. All I can say with payday loans is just don't do it. If you're at the stage where you need to use payday loans, it's time to go see a financial advisor and figure something out because you're in a desperate state or you're just not thinking. You should not be using payday loans. It's a complete waste of money. In some states in the United States, it's now legal to even have them because it's so bad for the consumer. Okay, time to do some calculations. What's the minimum payment on each of these credit card balance? balances. So someone owes $238.42. How much do they have to pay at minimum? Well, remember, it's 3% of the balance is how much you have to pay. So for 3%, we change it into a decimal, which is 0.03, right? We move the decimal over 2 spots. Then we multiply. 3% of 238.42. And if you multiply that amount, what you will get is $7.15. So is that how much they have to pay? No. How come? Because it's 3% or $10, whatever's the bigger amount. So in this case, they have to pay $10. Okay, take a look at that. $238 you owe, and you only have to pay 10. I mean, come on. Almost anyone can afford $10 at the end of the month. But if you only pay 10, you're getting yourself into trouble. Credit card debt. All right, next one, 3% of this. So 0.03 again, times 2,989. And if you do that, you get 89.67. So what do you got to pay this time? You have to pay 89.67. That's the bigger amount. It's bigger than 10. So you owe 3,000. You're only paying 90. Crazy. You're racking up debt. Be careful. All right, Kyle is buying furniture worth $1,075 on credit. He needs to make a down payment of 25% of the advertised price plus 20 monthly installments of $60. How much will he pay in total? What's the finance charge? And what's the finance charge as a percentage? So 3 questions here. So he needs to make a down payment of 25% of the advertised price, and the advertised price is $1,075. So we got to get 25% of that. How do we do that? Move the decimal over 2 spots, so 0.25. Multiply it by 1,075. If you do that, you get 268.75. Then he has to make 20 monthly installments of $60. So he's paying $60 20 times. In other words, 20 times 60. If you do that, 1,200. So he's got to do both of those things. We'll add those 2 things together, and we get $1,468.75. This is how much he actually pays. Next question. What's the finance charge? Well, the finance charge is the interest. It's like, how much extra did he pay? So anyway, this is the total. If we want to know how much extra he paid, we take how much he paid and subtract what he would have paid, like what the advertised price is, what he would have paid if he was wealthy enough to pay it all outright. Here's my advice for you. Get wealthy fast, and then you can just pay everything without using credit. Now, I can't really tell you how to do that, but good luck with it. So 1468.75, take away 1075. If you do that, you will have $393.75. Okay, this is how much it's owed. This is the finance charge, how much interest he paid. Next thing, we want that same finance charge, but as a percentage of the advertised price. So we want to know what percentage. This is the $393.75 out of this $1,075. How do we get the percentage of something? We do $393.75. We divide it by the whole amount. This is the part, this is the whole. That's going to give you a decimal, and then you multiply by 100. And if you do that, you will get 36.6%. Wow, that's very, very high, right? Would have been better off just throwing the whole thing on a credit card, because then he only pays 18%. Or line of credit would probably only have interest of about 8 or 9% or something like that. Or best thing of all, save up for it and pay the whole thing off at one go. That's the best of all. Okay, Frida signed up for a special credit offer when she bought her new TV. There were no payments and no interest for 12 months, as long as she paid the balance of $2,643.65 in full by the end of the first year. Otherwise, a penalty equal to an interest rate of 19.95% compounded monthly on the full balance would be charged starting from when she first borrowed the money. If Frida missed the deadline by 1 day, what would the penalty be? So remember, we have a formula for compound interest that we can use here. A equals P 1 plus I raised to the nth power. So what A is, first of all, is the total amount. What P is the principal. Well, what the principal is how much the balance is, $2,643.65. 1 plus I. Now, what I is the interest charged every time. So the interest is 19.95%, but it's compounded monthly. So this is the annual interest rate, and we need to know what it is monthly. So what we'll do is 19.95 for the annual interest rate, but then we divide it by 12. Then we know how much interest is charged every month. And the next thing we need to know is for how long are we doing this? Well, let's see. There's no interest for 12 months, so interest doesn't kick in until the 13th month. So once this number, this n value is 13, she has to pay interest. If the n value was anything less than 13, it says right here there's no interest, no payments, no interest. But if she waits until the 13th month, then no matter how much she's paid, she gets charged on the whole amount. This is that thing I talked about with the credit cards before. Even if she's paid everything off except for $1, that she still has to pay interest on the whole amount. So let's say that happened. She paid it all off, but she missed by $2, let's say. Well, this is how much interest she has to pay. How much does that equal to? Go ahead. Take your calculator out and do that. You will get $3,275.62. Now, that's not how much interest she paid, that's how much total she paid. To get the interest, you would subtract how much it would have cost with no interest. And what you'll find is when you do that, she would pay, because of missing by 1 day and only $2, I know it's kind of a silly example, but maybe she missed by $200 and it doesn't seem as silly anymore, she would pay $631.97, even if she paid the very next day it was due. So please be careful and be aware of what you owe, how much you owe, when you owe, very important. Suppose she made monthly payments of $150. What would her last payment have to be to avoid an interest penalty? Okay, well, we're the first 11 payments then. She's making her $150 payment. So that's $1,650. But ultimately what she needs to pay off is the whole amount, this $2,643.65. So whatever's left off, she's going to have to pay in the last month. Let's see how much is left off. We'll take the whole amount, subtract this amount, and if you do that, you get $993.65. So I think Frida should have done some pre-planning. She's planning on doing $150 a month, and then boom, in the last month she realized, oh my gosh, I have to pay $1,000 this month. Otherwise, I'm immediately paying an extra $631. How am I going to do this? Oh no, I better get another credit card. I better, it's just, this is the problem, people. Think ahead, use your credit card carefully, and always pay it off. Always, unless there's something dramatic going on. Don't be afraid to ask people who are better with their finances than you are, because let's face it, you're just learning your finances. Just don't be afraid to ask people for help and advice. Okay, enough of me orating. Have a good day.
Satellite of love.